Nickelodeon's kart racing franchise stretches a lot further back than a lot of people realise. It started in 2000 with the dreadful Game Boy Color version of Nicktoons Racing and the not so dreadful PC version. In 2001 that PC version was ported over to the PlayStation 1, and 2002 saw a surprisingly great GBA version released. Then finally, 2003 saw Nicktoons Racing released into arcades. From that point on, Nickelodeon were focused on PC and arcade for their kart races. Nicktoons Winners' Cup Racing came exclusively to PCs in 2006, while Nicktoons Nitro was arcade exclusive in 2008. But then for 10 years, the franchise sat dormant until one of the cheapest cash grabs known to man was pushed out the door in 2018. Nickelodeon Kart Racers revived the series with just 12 characters playable, a third of which were just the Ninja Turtles. For context, Nicktoons Racing back in 2000 had 13 playable characters. But that revival must have done well, because the same publisher and developer returned 2 years later for the sequel, Grand Prix, which was a huge improvement. A decent roster, solid controls, plenty of gameplay options. It really felt like developer Bamtang Games were given the time and resources necessary to make a good game. And that brings us to today. Nickelodeon Kart Racers 3 Slime Speedway is out, and looking to continue the success found in Grand Prix. Bamtang Games are back again at the helm and looking to cement Nick Kart Racers as a serious contender in the kart racing genre. Will they be able to take the series to even greater heights? Slime Speedway might just be the best kart racer of this generation. Now, you might say that being the best kart racer of this generation is pretty easy, considering Nintendo seems intent on milking an almost 10-year-old game forever. But I say, let me call it the best kart racing game of this generation to help my click-through rate. Just like Grand Prix, Slime Speedway eases you into the game with a forced tutorial. While this game mostly plays the same as its predecessor, there are a number of crucial gameplay tweaks that make this tutorial not totally redundant if you've played the previous game. Firstly, you'll now come across orange slime at certain parts of each track. Driving through this upgrades some items that you'll pick up. Then there are the slime slides, which seem to be an idea ripped from Mario Kart 8, albeit not as unique or well done. These slides are basically an on-rails section where you occasionally need to jump over obstacles. Sometimes the slides are a forced part of the track, but more often than not, these are placed as sort of secret paths you need to veer off into. When you're on the slime slide, your slime meter will fill up, so it really does pay off to seek them out. But while the slime slides are usually treated like this super secret awesome shortcut, their placement is usually so obvious and easy to get to that it might as well just be part of the standard track. We've also got a bunch of water sections added to tracks now, which transforms your vehicle into a watercraft temporarily. Apparently this was present in the OG game, but it was removed for Grand Prix, and now Bamtang has brought it back in a big way. They went way overboard with the water though. It feels like most tracks now have a water section, whether it makes any sense for that track's theme to have it or not. It feels like a bit of a misstep. The water sections could have been a great addition if they were used occasionally for tracks that make sense to have them, but spamming them across so many just makes it all feel run-of-the-mill. Another Mario Kart idea they've added in is the option to choose between a standard kart or a bike to race on. When you pick between these two for the first time, the game explains that the bikes will generally have superior handling and speed stats, while karts are handy if you're looking for a more all-rounder option. And this leads me to the game's kart and bike customization, which is impressively deep. In Slime Speedway, you'll pick between a kart and a bike, which type of kart or bike you want, and then customize it via its wheels and exhaust, topping it off with a shiny new paint job. In the last game, choosing your kart's body was tied to your specific character that you had chosen, but Slime Speedway opens this up so that any character can use any body. This is all on top of the fact that each character has their own set of unique stats. You can do a lot of tinkering here to find a setup that complements the way that you want to play. And this is all without me having mentioned the pit crew system yet. If you played Grand Prix, you'll be familiar with this idea. You basically pick a perk loadout for every race. You start with a crew chief who has a really powerful ability that you need to collect slime in order to activate. Then you've got 2 other pit members that provide less powerful but constantly regenerating abilities. Slime Speedway boasts up to 90 crew members, but I'm not entirely sure how many are available in the base game. There's a deluxe version of the game called the Turbo Edition, which amongst other things, seems to come with exclusive pit crew characters and kart parts. Either way, there is a crazy amount of customization here, and once again I have to gush about the pit crew system like I did in my Grand Prix review. It's a genius idea, and one that I feel gives the racing a greater layer of strategy than Mario Kart. Let's not kid ourselves, Mario Kart is the undisputed GOAT series of the kart racing genre, but the pit crew system feels like something that gives Slime Speedway a slight leg up. Trying to put together 3 crew members that complement each other is a big part of the fun here. Early on, I settled into a groove by using Hugh, who gives you a free homing football item with every item you pick up, and Valerie, who gives you a speed boost every time you hit somebody with an item. These 2 work together so well because I'd nail somebody with the football and then immediately I'd get a speed boost. As I started unlocking more pit crew members, I started mentally putting together other setups that would work so well together. With Slime Speedway boasting so much customization, you'd be forgiven for being a little overwhelmed by it all. Thankfully, Bamtang has tried to address this by allowing you to save presets for your races. You get 5 slots to use, and I think this is a nice way to encourage players to experiment with different setups without worrying about forgetting which particular setup worked well. On top of that, the game just automatically remembers what setup you used last, even when you've shut the game down and restarted it. I came back the next day, and when I started up my first race, Slime Speedway had auto-selected every option I had used in my final race the day before. Such a handy quality of life feature to have in a game like this. Unfortunately though, it looks like we've lost a feature I really enjoyed from Grand Prix, which allowed you to press a button and the game would give you a suggested setup based on which character you had picked. I've got no idea why they would remove this. It was a great way to take the work out of setting up your kart if all you wanted to do was jump into a race. As for the actual kart racing, well, it's once again very solid. If you're a kart racing snob who can't stand anything other than Mario Kart, then yeah, this probably isn't for you. But to me, the racing handles fine and I don't have any serious gripes with it. And Bamtang once again peppers in a bunch of fan service alongside the gameplay, which was something I really loved about Grand Prix. It felt like a love letter to the history of Nickelodeon, something All-Star Brawl really failed to do. They continued that here with small additions like changing the item box to be the Kids' Choice Awards blimp. Small things like that go a long way. Speaking of items, you've got a few new ones here to sink your teeth into, but for the most part you've got a similar slate as the last game, and most of them will be reminiscent of stuff you've seen in other kart races. I think they need to do a better job of not giving you OP items while in the lead though. They're not giving you the super broken ones that are generally reserved for people in last place, but I think a system like Mario Kart is necessary. As it stands, you're able to protect your lead too easily with what you're given sometimes. And occasionally, the opposition AI will bug out too. The best case was when I noticed that Jimmy seemed to be racing backwards at one point. When it comes to single player, Slime Speedway is a familiar experience. You've got Slime Scramble, which is just a renamed cup mode, free race, time trial, challenges, and arcade. It's the exact setup brought across from Grand Prix. I think it's a decent single player offering, but I'm still wishing for a Crash Team Racing style story mode. Something like that is desperately missing from modern kart races, and I think Nickelodeon would be perfectly poised to do that with their Nicktoons Unite history and all that. Slime Scramble is a typical cup mode. Different difficulty options are available to choose as you race through 10 different cups featuring 4 tracks each. The final cup repeats 4 tracks for some unknown reason, which means you've got 36 unique tracks to choose from in Slime Speedway. That's 8 more than the previous game, and 19 of these tracks are brand new. However, we've also lost 10 or so tracks from the previous game, which is a little baffling. I'd love to know the reasoning behind them being dropped. It feels like it would be super easy to just bring them over. Maybe the devs ran out of time because the returning tracks have been reworked a bit to feature the new gameplay additions. All of the old tracks have had slime paths added, while many of them have also had extensive water sections dropped in. Playing through the cups on normal difficulty will be an absolute breeze if you have any experience with kart races. To be fair, it felt like the normal difficulty was a little bit more challenging than the equivalent difficulty in Grand Prix, but it's still not a challenge. For me, the fast level was the sweet spot of difficulty. It wasn't ridiculously difficult, but I also wasn't curb stomping the AI in every single race. Each race you go through in Slime Scramble will present you with a couple of pre-race challenges, which the game refers to as double dares. As far as I could tell, these don't really do anything. At the end of a cup, the game hands out 3 awards and you get 10 coins for winning one of these, but the game isn't consistent with what awards are handed out. Sometimes somebody will get an award for completing the most double dares, but more often than not, 3 other awards will be there instead. It's very flawed. As far as I could tell, I wasn't getting any coins or anything when completing these double dares, so it really begged the question of why they were even there. Maybe I'm missing something. Once you speed through all 10 cups on a difficulty level successfully, you'll get a really strange cutscene. Firstly, it's really low res for some reason. Secondly, it plays out while the typical end of cup presentation music is playing, which gives it an even weirder vibe. And that's not even mentioning that the whole premise of the cutscene is odd. A bunch of characters are all shown racing, then Zim steals the trophy and they drive off after him. It feels like it would be the opening cutscene for the game, but that opening cutscene already exists and is so much better than this. The other single player mode you'll be spending the most time with is likely to be challenge mode, which is a fun distraction. It's also how you unlock half a dozen of the game's characters, so you're kind of forced to do it. Basically, you have 6 different tiers, each filled with a bunch of race challenges that force you to do unique things while using pre-selected characters and loadouts. The challenges are relatively simple and replicate a lot of the double dare stuff, like doing 2 blue drifts and then winning the race. But forcing different characters and loadouts gets you out of your comfort zone and experimenting with setups you might not otherwise have tried. When you get to the end of each tier, you have a boss race like Crash Team Racing, where you unlock that character upon winning. It's a fine mode, but if they make a 4th game and bring this back, they really need to think of some better challenges. A lot of them are dull. The worst was the challenge to overtake 5 racers.
Don't forget me. Sorry, didn't see you there.
I've touched on them very briefly, but let's dive deeper into Slime Speedway's roster, unlockables, and how it fares as a crossover of Nickelodeon's iconic shows. Starting out, you only have access to 12 different races, which is actually 4 less than in Grand Prix. There are a few different routes you'll have to take in order to unlock the full roster. The most obvious is via the slime tokens. In every race, you'll pick up slime tokens, which raise your top speed and fill up your slime meter. But on top of that, the amount of tokens you have once you finish the race is awarded to you to keep. You can grab a maximum of 10 tokens per race. But unlocking a character requires 150 to 200 tokens, which obviously translates to 15 to 20 races to unlock one character. This can be boosted a little by doing the cups, where you can get some extra tokens for winning the end of cup awards, but that doesn't help a whole lot. I don't know if I'm just misremembering my time with Grand Prix, but Slime Speedway feels super grindy to unlock the roster. especially when you take into account that there's a bunch of kart customization options that also need to be purchased with tokens. After completing 2 entire Slime Scramble playthroughs on separate difficulty levels, I still had a bunch of characters I'd need to grind up to purchase, and that was with me not spending a single token on anything other than characters. Being so focused on unlocking the characters also meant other aspects of the unlockables were being severely neglected. You start with 2 body types for karts and 2 for bikes, and unlocking new styles is mostly tied to slime tokens. I'm sure this has been planned out to try and promote players sticking with the game for a longer period of time, but it feels like a bit of a miscalculation. It's too grindy for my tastes. Thankfully, not every unlockable character is put behind a slime token paywall. As I mentioned, 6 characters are earned through the challenge mode, and there also seems to be other characters linked to beating certain cups, although the game isn't very upfront about this. Overall, the base game has 40 characters, and if you purchase the Turbo Edition, you would get Zuko and an Eastman and Laird reskin of Raphael. It's currently unknown whether people who bought the base game will ever actually get the chance to have these 2 characters. Characters in Slime Speedway that are making their debut include Susie Carmichael, Powdered Toast Man, Oblina, Squidina Star, Camper SpongeBob and Patrick, Jimmy, Cindy, Jenny, Toph, Zuko if you paid for him, April O'Neil, Garfield, and Odie. I was initially pretty disappointed that 2 roster spots were taken for Camp Coral's version of SpongeBob and Patrick, but that immediately ended when I saw how damn adorable they look when riding the bikes. But bizarrely, the entire roster from Grand Prix doesn't return here, which, like the tracks, doesn't make much sense to me. Actually, it makes less sense to me here. Unlike the tracks, which had to have some structural changes, the characters are literally the same between 2 and 3. Angelica, Heifer, Shredder, and Tommy don't return. No idea why, but it feels weird to have a recolor of Reptar make it in over them. And if they're sold back to the player via DLC, I'm going to be kind of mad. At the very least, we know Shredder and Heifer won't be returning, as they've been downgraded to pit crew characters for some reason. Overall, Slime Speedway's roster covers 16 different franchises, with new franchises being Garfield, My Life as a Teenage Robot, Jimmy Neutron, and Real Monsters. Thankfully, we didn't lose any franchises here. For comparison, Grand Prix had 30 races from 12 different franchises, so the roster is an improvement, even if there is some baffling decisions being made here. As has often been the case with recent Nick crossover games, it would have been nice to see a little more representation for their more recent shows. And classic shows like Angry Beavers, Wild Thornberrys, Rocket Power, As Told by Ginger, and Fairly Odd Parents are glaring omissions. The actual tracks here are generally pretty solid, even if they do have those issues with the slime slides and an overuse of water that I mentioned earlier. But there are some bigger issues with specific tracks. I encountered this glitch on Ba Sing Se where I literally could not go up the ramps. It also felt like the AI knew about this glitch, because for all 3 laps of that race, they all were seemingly avoiding these ramps for no other apparent reason. The Rocco's Modern Life Nature Orama track continues to be one of the most boring tracks in existence, and then there's the Turtle Lair track. This is legitimately a ripoff of Crash Team Racing's Sewer Speedway, but tweaked to be so much more cramped, and it ends up being easily the worst track in this game. But other than those 2, I enjoyed pretty much every track in the game. Okay, so if you've been following me for a while, you'll know my thoughts on voice acting in these kinds of games. It's really not important to me, but multiverses sort of changed my mind because of the way characters interacted with each other via their lines. It was so much more interesting than generic quips. One of Slime Speedway's big marketing points was the voices, and unfortunately, they're nowhere near the level of multiverses. In fact, I hate the voice acting here. This game is way too quippy, and most of the lines are so damn inane. Please just shut the fuck up for like 5 seconds. It was particularly bad when playing as Toph. She might be blind, but the girl sure can talk.
I'll do it, Snoozles! What on earth was that? I felt that. up! Almost there, Top!
Camper Patrick's lines were absolutely brutal to sit through.
That just blew my mind!
And then Aang's voice sounds so incredibly off, while also saying some of the weirdest lines in the game.
I gotta stay flaming! Hey! Gravity!
So yeah, you guys got what you wished for, hope you enjoy it. Thankfully, you can switch the voice acting off via the menu, which is how I'll be playing this game from now on. And then the overall graphics look pretty great. Tracks look really nice and have clearly taken advantage of the boost in power for next-gen consoles, while the character models also look great. Except Sandy, who is weirdly small, the UI looks a lot slicker compared to Grand Prix as well. The visual presentation is pretty much a unanimous improvement, as long as you ignore Arnold's cup-winning animation.
Receiving incoming transmission.
Slime Speedway is mostly an incremental upgrade over Grand Prix, but it's a game I would definitely recommend you buy if you love Nickelodeon. Heck, I'd recommend you check it out even if you're not a huge Nick fan, but you do have the itch for a kart racer that was released in modern times. Nintendo seems content to just milk Mario Kart 8 and test out how long they can get away with not making a new game in the series. So if you're not satisfied by DLC for an almost decade-old game, and you're looking for a brand new kart racer, Slime Speedway is a great option. The gameplay is tight and has so much depth, the roster is good, and there's plenty for you to do here. Disney is supposed to be releasing their kart racer, Disney Speedstorm, later this year, so it'll be interesting to see how those two compare. Speedstorm is doing something different, taking the free-to-play live service style to kart racing, the way Multiverses did it for platform fighters. It'll be a hard task for it to top Slime Speedway though. Next time I'll be looking at another game that was released on October 14, Star Trek Prodigy Supernova. Yes, a Star Trek game in Nickelodeon video game history is a little wild, but Prodigy is a Nickelodeon produced animated series. Now the show has come to the gaming space and is part of Nickelodeon's avalanche of games in October and November. They're set to release 5 games over this period. To make sure you don't miss that video or any of my upcoming reviews, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And to stay up to date with everything that's happening with the channel, jump over to Twitter and give me a follow.